I'm Greg, a 35-year-old father of 6. And let me tell you about my wife, Carla, who's 38. She went and betrayed me in the worst way, and now she's behind bars, begging to come back. Now, where to start? Life's been tough lately. With 6 kids, it's hard to keep the wheels turning, but we make do. Separation was a no-go because affording 2 households just wasn't going to happen. Carla, she's always been a handful. Immature, impulsive, and moody. She hears only what she wants and always takes it out on me when things go sideways. I'm the one who kept her life somewhat stable compared to her chaotic sisters, Cindy and Tina. I used to take pride that I was the one guy she hadn't cheated on. Boy, was I wrong. Almost 10 years in, she started working again, and I thought we had it figured out. She'd take morning shifts, and we didn't need daycare. Seemed like a great plan, right? But that's when she started bad-mouthing me to anyone who'd listen. I ain't perfect, sure, but she cranked it up to 11, yelling and screaming that she hated me. She said I was a lousy husband who couldn't satisfy her. Even after losing the house I owned before we met, just to pay off her massive debts, she didn't care. Carla's impulsive with money and threw a tantrum when I told her to slow down on buying a second car. She ended up with a Mazda and a $855 monthly payment, even though it was a mid-range model. Her previous car sold at a loss, and she managed to secure a new one that was far overpriced. When I'd ask her to treat me with some respect, she'd scream that I was calling her a lousy wife and that I was a terrible man. We'd argue at a fever pitch, and when I'd tell her she needed to change, she'd mock me with a, "Oh sure, I'll listen," like that's gonna fix anything. Her idea of fixed meant never hearing a word about her behavior again. Eventually she'd yell, "I wish I had cheated on you, and thank God I'm not pregnant with another one of your brats." Well, thank God indeed. 'Cause turns out she was cheating with at least 9 guys. 9! Carla had been chatting it up with a whole bunch of younger guys, mostly in their 20s, all with no real jobs or direction. One of them, Tony, she hooked up with right from the start. He even told her he'd be willing to be second fiddle if she kept seeing him, but she realized he was too much of a pushover and dumped him before I caught wind of the whole thing. It all started with some guy she met at work. When he ditched her, she broke down and began searching for more, messaging random dudes on Snapchat, one of whom she met up with twice and got intimate with right away. Meanwhile, I'm at home juggling the kids and all the responsibilities while Carla's out gallivanting. She'd go on dates at least once a week. I remember one fight clear as day, February 11th. She picked a fight out of nowhere that night, and I finally told her either she let me see her phone or I'd file for divorce. Instead of calming down, she called me saying, "When are you going to be home?" I had a workout planned, but I could tell she was itching to pick another fight, so I offered to skip it. But she told me to go, adding, "I don't want to hear you complain about missing your gym time later." I said, "I can make my own decisions. What are you up to?" She got defensive and hung up on me after saying I was embarrassing her in front of her friend. So I called her back and asked what was really going on. She yelled that I'd embarrassed her and then said she was bailing on our date. I tried going to the gym to clear my head, but then she tried to guilt-trip me, saying I should just drive drunk and die on the way to our date. That's when I realized she'd already been drinking, and I asked her point blank, "What's going on?" That night, she disappeared until 11 p.m., and when she finally showed up, she claimed she'd been with her work friend Tessa, trash-talking me. I checked her Snapchat later and saw messages confirming her timeline, but something still felt off. This was the date that broke my trust entirely. I told her, "Give me your phone or we're done." She had some secret app that looked like a calculator, but hid all her naughty pictures. I didn't realize that until much later, but even without it, the text messages were sketchy. The next day, I logged into our Snapchat and found messages from some guy named Beth, which was clearly a fake name. That was the moment I knew. I confronted her, and she let me believe she cheated with a woman to throw me off. She even went so far as to tell this Beth that they could include me in their next romp, but my 6 kids were on my mind. I wasn't going to jeopardize my family's well-being for some twisted game. In hindsight, Carla must have thought she was clever for leading me on with this Beth nonsense. She probably got a kick out of seeing me stew over it. But then there was Cole, another guy from work she was seeing on the side. She told him she loved him, and when I got annoyed over something trivial like headphones, she'd run off to send him suggestive pictures. The whole time I was in the other room trying to apologize. There I was, juggling 6 kids, cooking, cleaning, and changing diapers, while Carla was out and about 3 nights a week, whining and dining with whoever would buy her a drink. Meanwhile, I was home every night after work, letting her unwind while I took care of the little ones. The only thing she ever did was the laundry, yet somehow I was the bad guy. Even the woman who occasionally watched our kids encouraged her to cheat. She told Carla, "If you're truly happy with Greg, don't. But if you just want a little fun on the side, go ahead." Nobody had my back because Carla had already trashed my reputation to anyone who would listen. As I pieced together more of her lies, Carla lost her mind. She would physically pin me down and scream like a banshee whenever I said I was leaving. If I tried to protect myself, she'd shout, "Don't touch me! Don't touch me!" to make it look like I was the aggressor. She threw a knife at me once and threatened to kill herself in front of the kids several times. She even tossed cat food at me in a rage, which exploded against the wall. Another time, she whipped an Xbox controller at me that bounced off the wall and smacked me on the back of the head. And believe it or not, she once hurled a slow cooker my way. All this would happen whenever I'd catch her in a lie and let her know I was upset. Even though I said some harsh things in those moments, I mostly kept my cool. But one time when she threw that slow cooker and accused me of thinking she was acting like a tramp, I told her outright, "I don't think you acted like one, Carla. I know you acted like one." I knew she was lying about seeing only one guy, Tony. But after seeing those chats on Snapchat, I realized she'd sexted with plenty of other men, from random online hookups to her ex's old friends. Some of her coworkers even helped her get the number of some dude named Thor. The more I uncovered, the uglier it got. Carla was planning to visit her sick mother down in Vancouver, but she ditched that trip to stay an extra night with Tony. And she dared to claim he raped her, yet she had a picture of his sister downloaded on her phone the morning she left for the hotel. She was supposed to be with her mom, but she abandoned her family for this Tony character. When her mom and the rest of the family found out, they were furious, rightfully so. As much as it stung, I found solace in knowing all the men she went after were way below my league. They were scrawny, directionless, and downright pathetic. Carla knew she could do no better than me, and I was bigger than all of them too, which felt pretty satisfying. Retaliating was tempting, because I had been cheated on before, and I knew exactly what would happen if she thought I was weak or desperate. But I knew better than to beg her to stay. She called me up one day, crying her eyes out that she couldn't stand losing Cole because he wouldn't talk to her anymore. I just stayed quiet until I finally said, "You think I don't understand what it's like to lose someone? Listen to yourself." She tried a few more jabs at me, but I interrupted her. "Stop right there. You think I'm on this call waiting for you to come home because I'm heartbroken and can't live without you? Let me tell you, it's the exact opposite. Every bone in my body is screaming to leave." Carla hung up after that and stayed out all night with Tony instead of seeing her mom. Somehow she forgot who I was and how our relationship began. We started dating because I'd been cheated on, and back then that woman thought I was bluffing when I said I'd leave, but I didn't, and I wasn't bluffing now either. To make my point clear, I found 2 women on the side. One was an Asian woman named Diana, and the other was someone who messaged me on a dating app. She was stunning, and she knew how to flirt. She claimed she was obsessed with fit men and said she'd do anything for me if I forgot about Carla. I wasn't really planning on going all the way with these women, but it got the point across. Carla lost her mind when she saw their texts and tried to beg me to stay. After seeing those texts, Carla went into full-on panic mode. She'd lash out one minute, then beg me to stay the next. I kept cool, though. I wanted her to see I wasn't some pushover she could manipulate with her usual tricks. So when she didn't take me seriously again, I doubled down and found more women who could fill her place. One of them, Julia, said she'd inherited a 3-bedroom house and would be happy to help me raise my kids. She even said she'd share her home with us and take care of the little ones like her own. I showed Carla those texts so she couldn't accuse me of bluffing. Karma worked its magic too. Carla had used a fake name, Sharon, to set up a burner phone for her affairs. My daughter even asked Carla where Sharon went, and Carla slyly replied, "Ask your dad about Sharon." Funny thing is, one of the new women I found was also named Sharon. Talk about poetic justice. I finally laid down the law and told Carla she had to show me some respect. She thought I was weak and undecided on what to do with her, mainly because of our finances and the kids. But I told her that until I figured things out, we'd be living together on my terms. And if she kept treating me like garbage, I'd keep finding other women like the ones I showed her. I was burning with anger, but I kept it together. She knew she'd crossed the line too many times, and now she was scrambling to clean up her act. But things got serious real quick when I took the day off work on January 14th because our babysitter bailed on us. Carla called me in a panic, saying she'd lose her job if I didn't cover for her. So I stayed home and looked after the kids. But Google Maps had a different story to tell. Instead of going to work, she headed straight to Kirkland, staying there until 3:40 p.m. She was supposed to be working in Everett, but she had lied to both her friend and me about where she was that day. Turns out, she'd been planning her little escapade with another guy, and get this, it was our second son Caleb's birthday. While I was sending her videos of the kids having a good time, she was off hooking up with this loser. I had her cornered this time. There was no excuse she could give to explain herself. I checked her notes on her phone and found that on January 14th, she had a reminder to buy Plan B from the store. At first, she claimed she never bought it. Then she said she got it for Tony, but their affair didn't happen until February 1st. And then the clincher. She started her period super early on January 19th and texted her friend asking how long it took for Plan B to work. I confronted her with these details, but she still tried to lie. She finally admitted to seeing the guy, but not to having sex. I pointed out that she was there for hours, so she needed to quit lying. After going through the dates and the Plan B timeline, she broke down crying. With her back against the wall, she went into the typical cheater's act of fake remorse and desperation. "You can sleep with Lily," she sobbed, referring to some girl at her work who'd been cheated on herself. "You can have a threesome with me. Do whatever you want, just don't leave." But I told her straight up that I wasn't interested in random sex and wasn't playing her twisted game. It isn't who I am, and I wasn't going to stoop to her level. Things got even more ridiculous. In January, she messaged another guy online who'd been sweet-talking her with Angel and I love you. She swooned over him like a teenager. She once claimed she lost cash from her purse, but in reality, this online joker had convinced her to buy him gift cards. My wife, so gullible, fell for it and sent him hundreds of dollars worth of gift cards, like some amateur getting catfished. Then came the cherry on top. On February 16th, the exact same day I found out she'd been unfaithful, an old flame messaged her out of the blue. What are the odds? This guy had been out of her life for 10 years, and he suddenly reappeared at the exact moment we were fighting because of her infidelity. I didn't reach out to the old flame immediately. I waited until the July 4th weekend before messaging him to see when he had last seen Carla. He wasted no time, saying how he hated how her ex treated her. He even dropped his name, which helped me place the time frame. This guy was Carla's last boyfriend before me. Then he admitted he was glad he had slept with Carla while she was still with her ex, Christian. He even thought their affair might have resulted in a child. When he asked where Carla had gone after the last time they hooked up, I started panicking. He went on saying, "So I might have a daughter then, huh? I mean, we were pretty serious." That's when I realized the awful truth about my firstborn, Zoe. Her due date was supposed to be my birthday, August 2nd, 2012, but she arrived 2 weeks early on July 18th. Roughly counting back to November 9th, she would have been conceived around that date. I asked this guy what made him think Zoe could be his. He said, "Well, a mutual friend told me she got pregnant about a month after we slept together, so I always wondered." He added that he dropped it because this friend assured him he probably wasn't the father. The idea that Zoe might not be mine hit me like a punch in the gut. She was my firstborn and had changed my life completely. We had an incredible bond, and she reminded me so much of myself. She was my world after my dad had passed, and she gave me a reason to push through the pain. Now this stranger was suggesting he might be her father. That was the last straw for me. If Zoe wasn't mine, then getting an annulment was a sure thing. The church tribunal takes fraudulent concealment of a child's father seriously, and it's a guaranteed ticket out of a marriage. So I sent off a paternity test for Zoe on July 6th, and while I waited for the results, I planned to test the rest of the kids as well. I had already processed a lot of the madness and realized that some of Biden's new childcare credits and subsidies could give me a path out of this nightmare. Some of the news was bad, but some was good. While I was waiting for Zoe's paternity test results, Carla showed her true colors once again. She had this second phone, a burner, and our daughter managed to get her hands on it one day. Carla claimed she found it in a parking lot and threw it in the trash. But when I tried to look through it, she snatched it out of my hands in front of the kids. She went out to meet a friend, acting like nothing happened. I followed her to the car, but she refused to stop. She just put the phone in her pocket, pretending she had tossed it. I told her we needed to check the trash when we got home, and she agreed, but I knew something was fishy. She said, "Meet me there, and I'll dig it out." But when she finally did grab it, she kissed me and tried to play it off like it was no big deal. I saw right through her manipulation and realized she'd deleted most of the incriminating texts, but not the monthly plan for Straight Talk Wireless. There were even pictures of her in a house that wasn't ours. She claimed she was hiding those contacts in case I used her main phone, but I knew better. She tried to play it off as conversations with her coworker Amy and a gay guy named Colin, but I wasn't buying it. Why hide them if they weren't a problem? She refused to admit to anything and instead resorted to yelling and throwing accusations my way. It all came to a head when she tried to force me to hit her. She grabbed my wrists, screaming, "Hit me! Hit me!" I locked my hands behind my back, and she just kept trying to make my hands hit her. Eventually, I said I'd call the cops if she didn't back off. Carla mocked me, ran outside, and shouted, "Help! My husband is going to destroy me!" causing a commotion in front of our neighbors. She even called the police herself, but when they finally showed up, she tried to downplay everything, saying she only wanted advice. One officer spoke to her while the other came to me. At first, it seemed like they were about to leave, but when my officer relayed the details, the mood shifted. They went back to Carla and arrested her on the spot. The look on Carla's face went from smug to shocked in seconds as the officers grabbed her and led her to the squad car. She had thought she was just taking out the trash and that the cops would leave soon, but instead, she was heading to jail. My two oldest girls nearly had panic attacks when they saw their mom getting arrested. They ran inside and called me, their voices trembling. I explained to them that everything was going to be all right, but they were understandably scared. The officers then informed me that Carla would be taken in and charged. She had tried to bluff by calling the cops herself, thinking they'd take her side, but she crossed the line, and I couldn't let it slide. Washington State has strict laws regarding domestic violence, so even though I asked them just to warn her, the cops couldn't overlook what she had done. This was going on her record for good. The kids were heartbroken, and I was left to deal with the fallout. I didn't want to see my family torn apart, but this was a mess Carla had created herself. She'd been violent and manipulative for too long, and it was finally catching up with her. After a few days, she was released with a protection order that kept her away from me. Before the trial, she reached out and admitted a few things, but continued to lie about others. Her affair with Tony had lasted 6 months, but she tried to hide the extent of it. When I got a hold of the burner phone she had used for their conversations, I found she'd looked up gay porn, had sent pictures of our daughter Lily to this guy, and had been hiding even more. She claimed they always used protection, but I had my doubts. My gut told me she'd had threesomes with him since he was bi, and the gay porn searches seemed to confirm that suspicion. It was exhausting to handle the 6 kids, 3 ferrets, a dog, hamsters, and all the housework on top of everything else I was already doing. I knew Zoe's paternity test results were coming soon, so I prepared myself mentally for the worst. The results of Zoe's paternity test finally came in, and it felt like my world shattered when I read them. I'm not her biological dad. Despite all the ways she resembles me and our strong bond, she isn't mine by blood. I was too heartbroken to process it fully, but I knew I had to keep it together for my kids. I also got in touch with the potential biological father. He was genuinely sorry for what I was going through and said he always suspected Zoe could be his. He assured me that whatever happened, he was willing to help out. I promised him that I'd handle things the right way, no matter what. Meanwhile, Carla kept trying to manipulate everyone around her. She called me from jail, begging me to say, "I love you," every time she phoned. She went on about how lonely she was without me and how horrible it was in there. "Don't you miss me, even a little?" she sobbed. I told her straight up, "Why don't you see if Tony or one of the other guys can bail you out or watch the kids while you're locked up?" She cried even harder, admitting, "You're right. I don't need a boy. I need a man." Her bail was set at a whopping $100,000 because she had threatened to harm herself with a knife. The cops asked me if that was true, and I told them it was. They said it was too concerning to ignore and prioritize the kids' safety. When she went before the judge, he upheld the 5-year protection order, only lifting it if I wanted to remove it. Carla broke down crying uncontrollably. I'd never seen her that shattered, but I couldn't let my guard down anymore. This was the price of her deceit. She told everyone she was lonely and realized how lost she was without me. But I didn't fall for her pleas. Amber, who watches our kids, even overheard Carla sobbing in the background, saying how much she missed me. I spoke with Amber privately about my plans to move on, and she said she was ready to file divorce papers. She also offered to move in with Carla once her lease ended. We could pay her for daycare while claiming tax credits, and she would help offset the rent. I was determined to make this work for the kids' sake. I didn't want them to see me fail. When Carla realized she was truly alone, maybe she'd have her wake-up call, but I was ready to end things for good. It's been an unreal 5 months, but that's the story. Thanks for hearing me out.